Vancouver wasn't founded on logging, it wasn't founded on fishing, it was founded on speculation. And at the heart of that story is a deal. One of the boldest real estate deals in Canadian history. A handful of men convinced the Canadian Pacific Railway to move the end of the railway line from Port Moody, which was planned for years, and at the last minute change it to Coal Harbour, and a town that didn't exist yet, which would become Vancouver. And those men got very rich doing it. This is the story of the Vancouver Syndicate. It's a story of how Vancouver got created and tells us a lot about our complicated history with real estate in this town. In the early 1880s, it was common knowledge that Port Moody is going to be the terminus, or the end of the Canadian Pacific Railway. That's the railway that was going all the way across the country, and this was going to connect the country. Land was selling. There was a bit of a mini boom in Port Moody at the time. Land close to the ports that were increasing in value very quickly. And really the whole city of Port Moody was built on this expectation of trains at the time. But down the inlet, there was this tiny sawmill town called Granville, which is now around Coal Harbour. There was a group of men that started plotting, started buying, and started thinking about how much this land would be worth if they moved the terminus of the railway to here. Oppenheimer, Horn, Gravely, and a bunch of other men bought up that land, and they started lobbying both the provincial government and the CPR Rail to move the terminus. They became known as the Vancouver Syndicate. And you already know some of their names. Canby, Oppenheimer, Alexander. Our street signs in our parks are named after these guys because it was their land. And remember, at that time, there was no Vancouver. It was Granville. The tiny little village of Granville was renamed and rebranded at their behest. And more than at their behest, at the CEO, or whatever his title was at the time, of the Canadian Pacific Railway. This guy, Van Horn, had a very pompous name. Cornelius, let me look it up. It was William Cornelius Van Horn, president of the CPR. But he actually suggested change the name from Granville to Vancouver. This was before they announced the change in where the terminus was going to be. But Van Horn, he liked Vancouver because he believed the name had global brand power. Like he was saying it back then. Vancouver was the kind of place that somebody in New York, Toronto, London, or even Hong Kong might want to invest in. From the very beginning, even the name was a marketing ploy to get international investors to invest in Vancouver property. This wasn't just polite persuasion. They threw everything they had at it. These guys were cozying up to the right people in the provincial government and in Ottawa and at CPR and offering free or cheap land. They even ran a little smear campaign that said that the port in Port Moody wasn't deep enough, which wasn't true. But it worked. And in 1887, after there had already been a big party in Port Moody, the CPR announced that the end of the rail would be in the newly incorporated city of Vancouver, to almost everyone's surprise. But the Vancouver Syndicate knew, because they were ready to sell that land. And they did. By the way, Port Moody was furious, and the Port Moody Gazette, which was owned by a wealthy landowner in Port Moody, was fuming that it was fraud. No charges were ever laid. Allegedly, this happened. I think it was over 100 years ago, though, so I don't think anyone's coming after me. Unless Hamilton and Canby, your relatives, are out there watching this and are angry. In which case, I'd love if you come on the show, talk. I wonder what those people are up to now, if they're still living in the city, or if those legacies continue. It's 1887. Vancouver's very first land rush begins. Prices exploded, and lots that were selling for a couple $200 were worth over thousands just a couple years later. And what makes this extra crazy is, going from a couple hundred to 1,000 is a big deal. But years before, some of these plots of land were selling for bags of flour. Some people were trading like a single horse for a plot of land. I think these men that our streets are named after, some of them bought that land for a single horse and then turned it around for a couple $1,000s, or held on to it through some of these crashes and made a lot of money. To paint the picture of Vancouver at that time, there was 12 grocery stores and 16 realty offices. So there was more places to go and buy land than there was to buy food. Sound familiar? Yeah, and the speculation was crazy. Like, it was at that peak money never sleeps type vibe of, there was the stories that are told, there was parties that land was being flipped multiple times in the same party, and just the champagne was flowing and the wealth would never end. But it wasn't for everyone. 1890, there was an auction of new land on the market. There was about 370 lots, but 210 around of those lots got bought up by just 9 men. 50% of the land was owned by just 20 men. And it was about 85% of the entire land was owned by just 130 people. It wasn't really an open market. This was all insider trading, paper being swapped around, and yeah, good times for everyone. But when the rest of the town saw these men making all this money, they wanted a part of the action too, and yeah, why shouldn't they? That was peak market frenzy. Prices were up over 700%. They saw these men getting rich, and they wanted to create their own fortune. Many of them had come from logging and fishing and even gold panning, speculation, mining. They had that entrepreneurial spirit, but they were just on the outside looking in on real estate. So why not them too? There's actually stories about lineups of dozens and dozens of people outside new empty plots of land, almost like a condo pre-sale today. So this stuff's been going on for over 100 years in Vancouver. One of the guys from the Syndicate, Walter Graverly, he liked to joke that there was no rush. It was going to go on forever. And of course, he had nothing to lose. He was one of these guys that bought for colors, and now things were worth over 1,000. So even if things came crashing down, he still had upside. So the working class had finally joined the game, but they came in late to the party, and the rug was pulled out from underneath them. Like, at the peak was around 1890, when a plot of land on Granville and Dunsmuir, which had sold for, I think, around $200 in 1887, right after the railway was announced. In 1890, just 3 years later, was worth $1,100. But then by 1893, in that 3-year period, it was down to under $400. So the market crashed. And those people that got in late that didn't have access to those early sales, they got wiped out. A lot of them just regular working class people that had saved a year's worth of salary to buy in. There's stories of False Creek being full of shacks of people living because the economy was built on real estate and speculation. And when that went away, when construction stopped, when the music stopped, there was nothing for these people to do. But for those in the Syndicate, most of them were able to hold on. They just rode their way through the crash and actually bought up more for the next one. The next boom, that is. There's a couple guys that get wiped out that made dumb plays and over leveraged, which there's lessons, to be learned for the top 1% too, of like not getting too greedy and getting wiped out. And besides the point though, outside of those 100 people that were insiders and got in early, the rest of the town really got hurt by that real estate crash. And I know I'm talking about this bubble that happened over 100 years ago, but it wasn't a one-time thing. Like, it's not like it happened then and, it's happening kind of similarly now. No, there's been many examples of it in Vancouver's history. Like, just 10 years later, after that first crash, it happened all over again. Like, between 1908 and 1913, there was another boom. This time, they couldn't find any money locally, so they had to go somewhere else. They asked foreign investors to come in, and the developers, the real estate commissions, the Vancouver Syndicate, which had morphed into kind of something else at this point, was putting out newspaper articles in like Portland and London and New York saying, Vancouver, it's the land of destiny. It'll be the San Francisco of the North. Those are the actual things that were said. And people came, and capital increased by 1,000% within that time frame between 1908 and 1913. And there was another boom, but there was also another bust. Speculators were flipping land before construction had even began on it. There was one realtor for every 100 people in town. There was over 1,000 realtors in a town of 10,000 people. But yeah, that cycle continued. And in 1913, another crash came, Rents went down by 50%, people couldn't afford to keep their houses, construction halted, unemployment spiked like crazy. It actually caused civil unrest in Vancouver. There's a good exhibit around that time in the Vancouver Museum that's worth checking out. But yeah, realtors were still calling it the land of destiny, which is actually why I think it seems pretty obvious why Jesse Donaldson named his book Land of Destiny. And most of the stories I'm telling on here are in this book, and I learned about them because of Jesse's great work as a historian and journalist, and it's worth checking out that book for sure. I think what this story shows is that speculation is in the DNA of Vancouver, and specifically speculation on housing and property and land. It's built into our story. It's who we are. But from the very beginning, it was really only a handful of people that got wealthy, and the rest just got caught on the roller coaster. It's sheer luck if they wrote it up or wrote it down. Now, Vancouver Syndicate did more than just shape the history of this town. I think it shaped the culture. Because for people in Vancouver, real estate isn't a place to live, it's a lottery ticket. And the amount of real estate it takes up in our brains on whether we're going to buy that ticket or not, or when to buy, or when to sell, is outstanding. So here we are in 2025, and I'm watching my first slip in the real estate market, because for the 15 years that I've lived here, it's been nothing but profit, a meteoric rise. But as we watch it, I wonder if we're asking the right questions. I think most of us are asking, when will it bottom? Who's to blame? To be honest, I think we're all kind of getting ready to grab more real estate, to ride the bubble up again with that expectation. But I wonder if that sentiment and that belief is a good thing. Actually, I don't wonder. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing to live in a place where the homes that you live in are a constant cycle and roller coaster of speculation, because it creates immense competition between your neighbors. It creates immense haves and have-nots that is not built on merit. But I don't know how we stop the roller coaster, because it has literally been going since the day Vancouver became a city. If you have any solutions, let me know. If you think I'm just completely wrong and out to lunch, let me know. But yeah, I think we should be asking different questions. I think we should be asking how we make housing more equitable and how we smooth out these booms and busts in a way that is just more sustainable for everyone.